Sri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to our Saturday online Kashmir Cultural Heritage Awareness Series. Today is our 55th week. We start our program with a prayer by Srimati Jayashree Jayaramakrishnan. Jayashree has appeared in our program before and we look forward to seeing her more in our series. Jayashree?
Namaskar. Shri Shankara Guruvaram Shri Shankara Guruvaram Chintayami Bhavaharam 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 Shri Shankara Guruvaram Sashanka Ratipati Bhana Sashanka Ratipati Bhana Sashanka Ratipati Bhana Jaladula Kalanam Sashanka Ratipati Bhana Jaladula Kalanam Gama pada pamaga mapa pamaga gama maga saga sa gasa gama gasa pamaga sada pamaga gama pada pama pada sada pamaga ma pada sada pada saga maga saga dasa pada sada pada pamaga saga ma pada si shankara guru baram Ajnana Timirataranim Ajnana Timirataranim Ajnana Timirataranim Age Kriti Shruti Sadanim Sujnana Sukadaranim Sujnana Sukadaranim Sukshma Prana Varanim Sujnana Sukadaranim Sukshma Prana Varanim Gama pada pamaga mapa pamaga sagama maga saga sa dasaga saga maga sa pamaga sada pamaga gama pada pama pada sada pamaga ma pada sada pada saga maga saga dasaga sada pada sada pada pamaga sagama pada Shri Shankara Guru Baram Chintayami Bhavaharam Shri Shankara Guru Baram Chintayami
Thank you, Jayashree ji. Today's session is part of our monthly book review, which is our third now. We thank Dr. Raj Nehru, Vice Chancellor, Vishwakarma Skill University, for joining us to review his book, Kathasatisagar. Dr. Nehru has already appeared in our 29th series in March, and made an impressive presentation on Kashmir's contribution in fundamental unity of India. Those who are joining today, please watch his previous one to know more about the Vice Chancellor and his accomplishments, and also about Vishwakarma Skill University, first government skill university of India. We are also very happy Rohini ji, entrepreneur and columnist, Times of India, joining us for monthly book reviews. This is the third one. Rohini ji needs no introduction. She appeared in two of our book reviews before and also on her own, The Inspiring Women of Kashmir, which was in January. You can watch these in our YouTube, so you must subscribe. We offer our namaskarams to His Holiness, Sri Shankara Vijayendra Saraswati Swamigal, for his blessings for our ongoing Kashmir Initiative series. Before I request Rohini ji and Vice Chancellor Dr. Raj Nehru to take over, just want to share that I browsed through the review available on Amazon and read the dedication of the book. The first one says, to 5,000-year-old Kashmiri Pandit culture, and second also to the proud children of this land who carry with them the cultural heritage of Kashmir, which sums it all. The review also shows all the content so well organized and it's so tempting to read. I'm sure we will have question and answer series towards the end, and I'll be joining at the time. Now, I request Rogini ji to take over.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. A very good evening to all our viewers. I'm very happy to be here once again with yet another author and yet another book which has been written about the land of Kashyapa, Kashmir. Every time I talk to a new author, it's enlightening for me and it gives me personal satisfaction to bring out some narratives about Kashmir to the whole world because my own experience has taught me that the narratives are very powerful. Narratives shape the perspectives. Perspectives result in actions, and actions can have impact on millions of people. And therefore, bringing out those perspectives, the correct narratives about a place like Kashmir, which has been strifed on for decades, or I would say centuries, it becomes really important. So, very happy to welcome you today, Raji, into this program. And before we dive into the discussion about the book, I would like to give a brief introduction about Raj Nehruji. He is the Vice Chancellor of Sri Vishwakarma Skill University, Government of Haryana, and he's the youngest founding Vice Chancellor in the country. A veteran in human capital management, he has spent more than 2 decades in various organizations in the corporate sector. He's the former mission director, Haryana Skill Development Mission, and he's currently serving at various important roles such as director of the board of Haryana State Electronics Development Corporation Limited, member on formation of implementation plan for new education policy 2020, member of advisory council of policy research foundation for life by national executive committee of the foundation, member in Northwestern Regional Committee at All India Council for Technical Education, New Delhi, member of Executive Committee of Global Skill Park Society, Bhopal. He's also received various awards and recognitions and is into philanthropy with Utsa Foundation, which imparts education to the underprivileged. And he has received a special commendation from the state government and PMO office for his contribution towards disaster hit village Sadal in JNK. Welcome, Rajji.
Thank you.
There is something really interesting about the book that we are going to talk about today, Kathasatisagar. And as the title suggests, it's a collection of folklores, and folklores have the power to communicate in a very subtle manner the culture and the history of any place. The book can be enjoyed even by those who do not enjoy reading the hardcore history so much. And when we think about folklores, it transports us into a different world. It brings the memories of childhood, the grandparents, and all the fun stuff. So, my first question to you, Raji, is what was your motivation to write this book, and that too as a folklore and no other form of prose?
Thank you. Uh, First of all, my hand folded namaskar to Adi Guru Shankaracharya ji and to the entire organization that has been giving a very strong platform to rekindle the Kashmir and the stories of Kashmir and the various dimensions that are related to Kashmir. And to Shri Shankarji, who has been consistently doing this fantastic job of communicating this to the entire world about the facts and historical events and the culture of Kashmir and its fundamental unity with the larger India. And thank you, Rohini ji, for asking this question. I have been with my father for many ages since he became a little immobile because of his health, and that gave me an opportunity of sometimes sitting near him. And he used to narrate some stories of Kashmir, and we have many folklores of Kashmir which our elders, our grandparents, they used to share with us. And most of the times when he would share these stories, I would immediately record them and put it on the YouTube or Facebook. And many of the people started giving feedback that these are very important and very interesting stories. And that inspired me to start writing a small blog of on Kashmir. So, 2014-15, I started writing blogs on small stories that I used to hear, and then I used to find out and research by reading some books, and I used to collect them. So I found people were very much interested, especially the younger generation who don't have much of the time. They're busy in their professional world, economic world, and they wanted to know very small, brief snippets, some story forms. So that is when I and Professor Dr. Karyali, we connected when this lockdown happened in 2020, and we decided to consolidate all that work and do a little bit more research. And then that is where this book actually came up. We started in March 2020, and in 2022 we were able to finish this and produce this as Kathasatisagar.
I've seen those videos which you used to post of your father, and it's a real treasure of knowledge and information. Would you be able to elaborate on the title of this book? Because a lot of people have asked questions about Kathasati Sagar. What is its significance and how did it come about?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because many people have asked me this question. In fact, this morning I was also trying to answer this question. So many people, they are whether they are familiar or not, I don't know, but many people in Kashmir are not familiar with a, a book that is as good as Panchatantra and Jataka Tales. That's called Kathasatisagar. It's a gift of Kashmir in the form of ocean of stories. It contains stories within a story. It has been written by Somadev somewhere in 11th century. Uh, when I read this book, I was very fascinated with the way this book was written. And many people didn't know about this book that this is something which has emerged from Kashmir. And when I was looking to give a title to my book, I also realized that somewhere this Katha Saritasagar must also start getting into the memories of people. They should start asking about it because people will start talking about Kathasatisagar. So the first thing was the inspiration was Katha Saritasagar can be the word Katha Saritasagar can be rekindled by giving a similar, which is most close to that name. But why I chose Katha Sati Sagar is Kashmir is also called the land of Sati, and these all stories are from the Sati land. So my reason of another reason of giving this title to the book was because all these stories are from the Sati land, so it also resonates with Katha Sati Sagar. There is a pool of huge ocean of small folk tales, so why not give it the name Katha Sati Sagar?
And even Sati sir has a significance for Kashmir. Uh, so I was thinking that it's probably come from there. My next question is that you mentioned that the book articulates the reality of ancient Kashmir, where people belonging to different sects lived peacefully together. Is there any folk tale in the book which was jointly told by all, irrespective of the religion, or any folk tale which talks about the peace that prevailed?
I think we should not be trying to find out stories that will confirm that peace prevailed. Kashmir was a land of peaceful coexistence, and that you can see from multiple examples. That it's a land where Vaishnavism, Naga culture, where Buddhism, where Sri Guru Nanak and many other, including the Christians, have actually flourished without having any fight or war. There used to be fights, but they were all intellectual fights where they would want to command over some of the intellectual debates, and they would fight through intellectual debates. So I don't see until 13th century or 12th century, uh, which comes to my notice, any such incident that would give you a reason to believe that Kashmir was a place where people would fight in the name of their belief system. Had that been so, you would not have had fourth Buddhist council in Kashmir, where Buddhists found that Kashmir was the only place where they would be understood, and it actually happened. Because if you see, most of the scholars who actually took Buddhism to the Central Asia, Tibet, and China were Kashmiri scholars who learned Buddhism, who were influenced by Buddhism, and then took it ahead to Central Asia, China, and Tibet. And I don't see there has been any kind of conflict at any point of time. So the region has been a cradle of multiple faiths, beliefs. It's also called the cradle of civilization, where from many beliefs and many thoughts have emerged. So I today we may be because of the environment around, we may be trying to find out some reasons or some incidents, but I don't see that is the way we should be looking at. The Kashmir's history is very plain and simple, and there are so many authentic writings, including you have Nilmat Puran, you have the Raj Tarangni that gives you the political history of Kashmir, and then you have this Nilmat Puran that gives you the social history of Kashmir. Nowhere you'll find any such incident happening in Kashmir. So, but there is a attempt by many people, because that attempt is to divide the society in the name of Buddhism and Hindus and Sikhs and other sects that have been that had their beliefs. In fact, there are stories where many researchers have indicated that Jesus, during his missing years of 13 to 30 years, was in Kashmir. And they also believe, based on some of the manuscripts that they have referred, uh, which they have studied in the Tibet, in some of the monasteries, that he was after his crucifixion, he did not die in Jerusalem. He actually was brought down from the cross and he was brought to Kashmir, where he spent some more years. So there are many such stories which go around and which we have also mentioned in the Kathasatisagar. So Kashmir has been in a melting pot of so many cultures and so many belief systems, and they assimilated in each other and lived very peacefully.
Absolutely. So, in fact, this is the question I wanted to ask you, that in what way does Kathasati Sagar talk about Kashmir being a melting pot of knowledge, a cradle of civilization, as you have mentioned, s- where many languages flourished, many religions and cultures flourished. So, something which is there in the book, which talks about that in what way?
Yes, there are many such stories that we have published, and if you see, there have been so much of debate going on the contribution Kashmir and Kashmir scholars have made. And when I was see, I want to also make this clear. I'm not a historian, but when we were researching for this book, we read many books, we referred many articles, we referred many research papers before we concluded, okay, we should include this in our book. And we found a considerable amount of scholarly evidences that made us to believe that these are very important stories for us to bring into the light. For example, you have philosophers, you have poets, you have dramatists, you have grammarians, you have medical scientists of those times, uh, and there are many such mathematicians who have contributed immensely to the Kashmir, from the Kashmir and to the larger national perspective. Let's take an example. You have a very important and a courageous poet whose name was Bilhan. Uh, and Bilhan's poetry has been of world fame, and there are beautiful stories around Bilhan that we have been able to find. He has an interesting story where during his Bharat Brahman, when he left Kashmir and moved towards eastwards, he fell in love with a princess whose name was Yamini Purnatilka. And when the father of the princess, the king, came to know about this, he got furious and got the Bilhan imprisoned and put him into the jail with an uncertain fate. So it was a traumatic time for him, as he didn't know whether he will be hanged or beheaded. But while in detention, he wrote an epic poem, which is also known now as Chaur Panchashika, that highly impressed the king. And after listening that poem, the king forgave him and he was released from the jail. And there are many European scholars who have translated this poem. I remember when I was researching, I found Povey Matthews translating this poetry and calling it Black Marigold. And there are many other ones who have also translated it, and they call it 50 Verses of a Love Thief. And this is the same Bilhan who later became the part and who was the part of the King Vikramaditya's courtier, and he was the writer of Vikramaditya Charitra, Vetal Pachisi, Vikram Vetal stories that we hear. There are very important research inputs coming on Maharishi Charak, that in the area of science and medicine, many people don't even know that the history and development of Indian medicine began in Kashmir, and that was by a Kashmiri Brahmin, Maharishi Charak. Panini and Patanjali is also, by many scholars, mentioned uh, to be from Kashmir, and these there were these three sages, Panini, Kartayana, and Patanjali, who used to be called Munitraya. The three sages from Kashmir, they used to be called Munitraya, the architects of Sanskrit grammar. That has no match in the world for its scientific design. We have been hearing about Shakespeare, and but many people don't know. In fact, there is a book written by Lakshmidhar Kalla. I could refer to this book. It has been written somewhere in 1926, and this book is titled with the birthplace of Kalidas. Now, in this book, the author has significantly put so many evidences, which is validating that Kalidas was born in Kashmir and then moved to southwards and sought the patronage of the local rulers, and that's how he prospered. In fact, not only Lakshmidhar Kala has mentioned Kalidas, there is another writer. His name is Mohan Rakesh. He did a play, Ashad Ka Ek Din, in 1958, based on Meghdut. He also has mentioned that Kalidas belonged to Kashmir, and all these people have been mentioning he's belonging to Kashmir also based on what Kalidas has written, and they say that he could not have written that unless he had been grown and nurtured in a climate and environment like Kashmir. So there are, as I said, this is only the tip of the iceberg. The history of ancient Kashmir is full of amazing contributions in different fields that can fill one with the sense of pride. In fact, many of the Kashmir Pandit scholars, moved towards the rest of the country, towards south, and towards the rest of the part of the India, and contributions they have made and recorded in various states. In fact, when I used to travel to Madhya Pradesh and south, I found many people talking about this is when the in ancient days some Kashmiri scholar had come. In fact, someone was telling me I had met someone in Kerala some years back. So they were saying that Kashmiris have been their contribution in Sangeet Ratnakara and some Karnataka music and some philosophy that they were talking about, that I am not remembering the name that they mentioned, that they said that these people have made a significant contribution. I was in China. I remember many years back when I was with IBM, I saw a statue of a person, and it was written in Chinese. And I inquired, and I found that it is the statue of Kumar Jiva, who was the son of a Kashmiri Brahmin, and he had moved to China. That Brahmin had got married to a Kutch princess, and this Kashmiri Brahmin was instrumental in translating all the Sanskrit-based Buddhist literature into Chinese, and he is revered one of the greatest scholars in that region. So, if you go to the ancient Kashmir, there are so many scholars, and then when you go to the post Islamic rule that happened in Kashmir, you'll find, despite the subjugation, despite the way the culture got destroyed, and you still find poetesses like Laleshwari, Arnimal, Rupavani emerging in Kashmir with such thought-provoking poetry that is so deep in their words and meanings. So There are many things, many things that if we go and read about Kashmir, that will really surprise many people. And there is still so much hidden that many people don't know, because the way destruction has happened in last 700 years, the manuscripts, the way they have been destroyed, I still feel there is so much hidden in Kashmir that is yet to be unfolded.
I'm sure it's really an ocean, and I hope that the book Kathasati Sagar will definitely enlighten people about so much more. Um, in fact, my next question is about what you just now said about the Islamic invasion. So, in your book, you have said that it brings to light the invasions and forcible conversions that led to the genocide and the seven recorded exoduses of Kashmiri Hindus. So, can you tell us something about that?
Uh, See, you all of us have heard about the predators. In the animal world, there's a word which we use very frequently that's called a predator. And what does a predator do? A tiger is a predator, right? What does a predator do? Uh, it pounces on the animals that it can grab, and then it kills them, breaks them into tiny pieces, and the predator's digestive system breaks the prey into smaller parts, and then these parts get reassembled into the healthier cells of the predator's body. The tiger becomes stronger and the prey disappears. This is exactly what has happened in the world. You have aggressive civilizations like predators that have dismembered and defeated the non aggressive civilizations and have broken them into smaller, digestible parts. And then they pick and choose whatever qualities they want and that is appropriate to them. And then rest of the things they will destroy as if it was never there. It happened across the world, whether you go and see the European colonizers, how they did what they did with the Native Americans. And similarly, you will find what today China is doing systematically and slowly digesting the Tibetan civilization. So this this uh, this dominance of aggressive civilizations has been there for many years, and uh, the Islam also digested the entire Arab civilization. Arabs were not the Islamic. They had their own local tribes, and one of the famous tribes was the Quraysh tribe. So I will not go into that. So Islam digested the Arab civilization, and you can find many commonalities in practice that happens to be Arabic way of life, but still they call it Islamic. Romans and Greeks, they did the same thing. They digested Greeks and later got overtaken by the Christians. So, digestion is inherently a destructive process that has happened across the world, and that is what has happened to Kashmir. Kashmir and their and the our rich civilization has also suffered this cultural digestion by these aggressive what we call predatory civilizations. While in most cases you'll find this happening through physical genocide, like seven exoduses that you talked about after Shahmir coming in and the Sikandar Butchikan taking up, and that is the time somewhere in 13th 14th century when we see hundreds and thousands of Kashmiri Hindus were physically annihilated. In fact, in Kashmir, somewhere near the Dal Lake, there is a place between Dal Lake and the Ranawari that is called Bat Mazar, And but Bata means Kashmiri Pandit, and Mazar means the graveyard. So this place is called the graveyard of Kashmiri Pandits, Bhat Mazar. And this is not the name I have given. My ancestors have given this name. The local Muslims have given this name because this is the place where Sikandar Butchikan burned tons of the sacred thread soaked in the blood of Kashmiri Hindus who were killed and butchered and burnt and you know uh, heckled there. So this physical genocide did not start with only and stop with Sikandar. It continued with many years. We had Mughals coming in, we had Pathans, Afghans coming in, and Hindus have been consistently butchered by kings after kings after kings after kings. And this physical genocide has continued in one form or the other form. But in my book, the book that me and Dr. Garyali has written, we have also highlighted that Kashmiri Hindus have not only suffered the physical genocide, they have also suffered a cultural genocide. Here it's very important to understand what is cultural genocide. See, while in the physical genocide, it is complete destruction of the individuals. Cultural genocide, in my understanding, is the destruction of the culture, heritage, rituals, practices. While physically you may be alive, while physically I am alive, but I'm deprived today of my worship places. I am deprived today of my rituals, which I performed from thousands of years, practices which I performed thousands of years, those places where I used to go and pray. So I think, besides physical genocide, this cultural genocide is even more dangerous. Even if I live as five, like we say, seven Kashmiri Pandits only survive, seven Kashmiri families only survived. Even if we survive with five families or 10 families, if the culture is destroyed, if I am deprived of my cultural rights, it is one of the biggest crimes that has. So to me, this exodus, that the seventh exodus or the eighth exodus, whatever you call it, this exodus has not only physically destroyed us by hundreds of Kashmiri Hindus getting killed, raped, butchered, it has also deprived us of and weakened our cultural understanding among the community, youngsters, to a large extent. And so when you say the killings, and I see the biggest crime today is not only the physical genocide. I think biggest crime is the cultural genocide. In fact, if you see all the international organizations, including the UNESCO, uh, cultural rights are seen as an integral part of any ethnic community as a matter of their human rights. So we have not only the genocide has not only happened to us in terms of physical genocide, we have been deprived of our human rights as well. While the ethnic cleansing was one of the gravest crimes committed on this minority ethnic community, there is also an issue, a serious issue of human rights violation that uh, is continuously happening. And I'm worried these youngsters who are day by day getting assimilated in new cultures, because wherever they go, they live in US, they live in Canada, they live in Europe, they live in other parts of the country, they are getting assimilated in the local culture, which is not bad, but at the cost of the cultural genocide of one of the beautiful civilization, part of that beautiful civilization. So that's what I would like to conclude on this point.
In fact, I truly agree with you, and I understand what you're saying. Uh, the culture is something which keeps us rooted, And however you might travel around the globe, have a fancy career, but there is some point in time in everyone's life when you know they want to know where I belong to. And that's what when you talked about losing that culture, it's the loss of identity, and it's the that loss of uh, feeling that who am I ultimately. And the culture has a very I would say very close connection with the geography also. If you look at various rituals, Shivratri, for example, in Kashmir, the ladies used to go out with the pitcher full of walnuts, and then they would fill that pitcher from jhelum. So jhelum exists in Kashmir. So geography has a very close relationship with your rituals also. So during the festival time, during Shivratri, you would walk out and you will see all the markets were full of those that material which is used for puja or in any other form for that particular festival. But when you are not there physically, you are in some other place, you may celebrate Shivratri and you will post your Shivratri videos on the Facebook, but that element is missing, and that's um, you know would be the loss of that identity and culture.
Yeah.
That's true, and that cannot be recovered.
See, to just add a line to what you said, while these are some of the practices that we may see it from a practice point of view, we may see it from a ritual point of view, but these practices, these rituals, these belief systems, they have provided the entire Kashmiri community a sense of identity, a
Exactly.
sense of belongingness, and a sense of safety for many, many ages. See, when you get up in the morning and go to the banks of a river and perform some kriya, it's not about doing a kriya. It's about feeling that kriya and feeling that sense of pride, sense of safety, and sense of connectedness with some divinity that gives you a solace.
True.
So my existence was based on those practices, and that was a source of my living, my energy, my all the spiritual, intellectual, emotional, religious, ethnic pursuits. and
True.
and that's what I'm saying. It is not so simple that it's a ritual. These
Yes.
rituals have given us a sense of belongingness, a sense
True.
of chemistry, a sense of oneness, a sense of connectedness with divine. Because we belong to a land where we feel, uh, you know, we feel the moksha can be attained in many ways. It's not only that you have to what we call, uh, you know, uh, in the larger India, if you see, there's a belief uh, that you have to give up the world and you will be able to achieve the moksha. But in Kashmir, these rituals are part of that larger belief where renunciation of the world is not considered important, where rather than giving up the world, it is believed that moksha is the development of true sense of who you are. And while being a homely person or a working person or being a professional or being a writer, philosopher, you can still attain moksha. That was the philosophy in Kashmir.
And that reminds me of the fact that when we call about culture and that belongingness, people, the community is an inherent I would say, the backbone of this whole thing. When you talk about various rituals, they are very much connected with your sister, with your mother, with your paternal grandfather. So on Shivratri, you would go to your maternal, grandparents' home. So a lot of things like that. So, but now the thing is that even the community is not at one place. So there is a total loss of that backbone of those rituals, which was formed by the entire community, and the community is scattered. So that was about culture. Now, I would like to ask you one very light question, and that is, uh, which is your most favorite folklore in this whole book, and why?
See, there is not a single folklore uh, that is the most favorite to me, because the more you read the book, I have that book in front of me. The more I read this book, the more I find that there is still something that that I haven't read, and that may be even more important. So, if you ask anyone, they will have very different perspectives about the stories. But the beautiful story that I sometimes connect, I take that story um from Nilmat Puran. And this is one of the most fascinating story. I really loved. I used to narrate the story to many people many times. It's about the coronation of the first woman empress in the world, uh, by different means. I may say Queen Yashomati. But the story behind that is even more interesting. How the Queen Yashomati, the first queen of the world, got coronated in Kashmir. And the story goes to the King Gonanda, who was the friend of Jarasandh, and Jarasandh was in war with the Yadavas, that is Lord Krishna and Balram, and Jarasandh sought the help of his friend, and one of the most mighty friends of those times was King Gonanda of Kashmir. So Gonanda went with his army to support Jarasandh, and in that war he was killed by Balram. So, Gonanda's brother back in Kashmir, Damodar, was installed as the king of Kashmir. And some years later, when Lord Krishna and Balram, they were going to Kandahar for attending some function, it came to the notice of Damodar, and he decided to take the revenge of his brother, King Gonanda, and he went and challenged Krishna and Balram. In the battle, he was killed by Krishna. So when Damodar was also killed, the entire you know uh, and people who counselors of Lord Krishna, they advised him that now that there is no king in Kashmir, so why not Yadavas rule Kashmir? To that, Lord Krishna replies that Kashmir is a land of Sati and no one can rule Kashmir. And he goes to Kashmir, and at that time, Yashomati, who is a pregnant queen at the time, is installed as the radiant queen of Kashmir. And that's how uh, Nilmat Puran talks about the first empress of Kashmir, that is Yashomati. The story doesn't end here. There's interesting connection between Mahabharata also, that why did not the king of Kashmir participate in Mahabharata? And this is the opening question in Nilmat Puran, where Raja Janmejaya asks this question to Maharishi Vaishampayan and asks him, Maharishi, why did not the king of Kashmir participate in Mahabharata? And the story is what I said, that Yashomati, she was pregnant at the time, she delivered a baby boy, and that boy was too young to participate in the war, and there were some rules in India, Bharatvarsha, in participation of wars. The king, who was still not an adult, they were exempted from participating in the war, and Queen Yashomati decided not to participate in the war, and that's why Kashmir did not participate in Mahabharata. So this is one of my favorite stories from Nilmat Puran. I love this because why I love this, it gives you an answer to many questions, that how Kashmir has been connected with the Bharatvarsha for thousands of years, and it's an answer to those people who disbelieve. And this is not a story of suddenly popping up from somewhere. It is one of the fundamental questions on which the entire Kathasatisagar, on which the Nilmat Puran, one of the oldest documents available, when there was no Islam, and this is a book for those those radical Islamists who actually keep on changing the narrative of Kashmir's history, that what actually Kashmir was and Kashmir's fundamental unity with Bharatvarsha.
That's really interesting and amazing. And yes, truly established the connect of Kashmir with Bharatvarsha. One last question that I want to ask is that you mentioned that the book also talks about, yourself and Dr. Garyali have suggested some, I would say, ways in which the Kashmiri Pandits can have a dignified return to Kashmir. Can you shed some light on that?
See, one important question that has always been coming from many quarters is when India became uh, independent, and it was expected now that Kashmir being a part of India, the kind of discrimination that the community which had eventually become a minority will not happen. But we have seen a different kind of Kashmir. And when this question was asked to the Indian politicians during 1950, they said Kashmir has a different situation. It's a guided democracy, so let's not interfere there. And their non interference led to further discrimination uh, with the Kashmiri Hindus. Many people know that the land reform bill was passed, and the purpose of that land reform bill was to snatch all the land from the Kashmiri Hindus, and that was eventually passed on to the agriculturists who were working in those fields, only to appease the majority community and discriminate with the Kashmiri Hindu community, which was an economic onslaught on the community. So when we see what has been happening in Kashmir for many years, we see there has been a policy of discrimination that has continued in Kashmir. And many people, perhaps, there was a narrative created that non Kashmiri Pandits were ignored and not given the opportunities. The fact remains that it was primarily because of the orthodoxy of their clergy that scared them for modern education. And the another reason was that most of the non KPs were artisans and farmers. They showed no interest for education. Because Kashmiri Pandits continue to learn new languages, whether it is Farsi, whether it is Urdu, whether it is Persian, whether it is Pali, Sanskrit, Sharda, any language you say, they embrace these languages. But the non Kashmiri Pandits, their own clergy, did not allow them to pursue other languages, other manuscripts, just because it was considered anti-religion, and that's how the entire majority community, they pursued different professions. And when this narrative was built that all the all the major posts and positions were occupied, and it actually happened automatically, because when you pursue education, when you pursue intellectual aspects, when you pursue literary aspects, you will be given opportunity by the courtiers. So until 1980s, in 90s, we have seen this discrimination. We also saw the kind of destruction that happened in 84, 85, 86, 87, in Anantnag and in many other parts, where the temples were desecrated, broken, burned, many Hindus were killed. And then we have seen 1990. So the point today is that when you were eliminated one by one, you were scared and threatened. When the majority says we didn't do anything, but a minority of people within the majority, they were successful in driving the minorities out. You can't simply look this situation that today you can return back and live peacefully back with the same neighbor who was silently watching the murder or the rape or the killing or the destruction or the burning of your own houses. So there is a issue, a challenge that encounters every Kashmiri. But there are many other major issues today. One of the major issues is, for last 32 years you have been driven out, and hundreds of your family members have been killed, raped, butchered. Not a single person has been brought to the justice. Now, this is even bigger discrimination and violation of our fundamental rights. You see, if you are not given justice by bringing the book, or by putting up people on trial who have done all this to you, rather, they are giving the red carpet welcome by many governments and ministers of past. How do you trust the system and the governance around you? Not only this, the Pandits who fled Kashmir, they were forced to sell their properties, lands, houses under distress. A house that would cost whatever money was sold at a throwaway price of 10% of the total price, market price of that time. And today, the government has not the spine to get up and get that property back to the original owners who have been thrown out and have been paid peanuts for those properties. You must see how the Pandits are living in the camps that have been provided. Government says we have provided them living accommodations. To me, they are decorated slums. You go and see the living condition of the families in those camps, how they are living. There is no health system, no sanitation system, no education system that can match to their pursuits. Many of the youngsters are today turning to drugs. So, government, unless they can keep on blaming that you are doing nothing, what will they expect a community who is just a small minority and has lost hope completely with the system, who has continuously deceived them for not giving them justice? So how do you expect them that they will trust such systems? So I think there are many organizations who have raised points at many points of time. Some people have talked about there must be a truth commission. Some people have said the files must be opened, the trials must begin. Some people have said their properties must be restored. Some people are saying that they should be rehabilitated in Kashmir. But how will you rehabilitate them in Kashmir? Will you make the same decorated slums for them in Kashmir? So there are many questions which many people don't have answers. But if you ask me, I think it is not a battle that will end in next 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 years. It's a long battle, and Kashmiris, Hindus, Pandits, They need to have patience, but they need to have persistence. They need to have courage. They need to have a coalition that will work together, and that should be prepared for forging that battle for many, many years ahead of us. We don't need to get frustrated by the events that are getting unfolded around us. We need to pass on this baton from one generation to another generation with a vow that one day we will go back, and one day we will reclaim what is due to us. So I think there are many, many questions that require a lot of debate. But to me, return is unquestionable. We have to go back. We should not leave our claim of going back. Now, the modus operandi of going back, it may take time, because with time things will evolve, and as the things evolve, new thoughts may emerge on the scene.
So that leaves us at a point where we are still, wondering. That reminds me of one very important thing. When you were talking about the majority appeasement and minority being sidelined, it's a paradox that in Kashmir, Kashmiri Pandits were never considered to be a minority. It was in 1970s when a Kashmiri Pandit delegation met uh, the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. This is written in the Chronicles of Kashmir, the biography of Pandit Amarnath Vaishnavi. Actually, the delegation had met Mrs. Gandhi under his leadership, and they talked to her about the kind of discrimination which was faced by the minorities there. And the answer which Mrs. Gandhi gave was that you are living in a Hindu majority India, and you are the big brothers there, and you have to learn to live peacefully with people over there. So that's the paradox of the majority and minority in Kashmir.
No, that's
So,
true. That is not only the paradox. Let me also tell you, there was no word like minority in the Jammu and Kashmir constitution. And
true,
they, while they would be considered as a minority, and they would take the lion's share from the Indian constitution where they were considered as minority, but when it
minority.
came to Kashmir having a separate constitution, they would not treat you as a minority. And the
Exactly,
minority word was never a part of the constitution. So that is
absolutely. And
how they discriminated. They would take the benefit of being a minority in the country, but when it comes back to Kashmir, they would cry that they are the minority, but they would not accommodate the real minorities of Kashmir.
that's how a lot of discrimination happened there against the real minorities of Kashmir. So um, this was really a very enjoyable discussion, and I hope that you also enjoyed it, Rajji. And really thankful to Kanchi Kamakoti Foundation and Madhyama Dharma Samajam for giving this platform, to tell people about Kashmir. Mr.
Thank
Shankar,
you.
over to you.
Thank you, Rohini ji and Vice Chancellor Raj ji. It was very fascinating. Like your previous lecture, just wanted to touch upon a few points. You talked about the battle won't end in a year or so, but I think it's fair to say the battle is ending. Can we say that the battle is ending? But we don't know it's going to be in 1 year. But with all the awareness that we are creating here, by the way, thank you so much for the kind words you said initially. That is exactly Kanji Mutt's concern also. What you talked about the digestion, you talked about peaceful coexistence. So we believe that the battle is ending instead of won't end in 1 year. You agree on that?
See, I am very hopeful. I am very optimistic that battle should end. But given the way things are emerging, not only in Kashmir, things are emerging in the larger global context. We have a long way ahead, and it's not going to settle so easily, because on the one side where there are converging forces, there are even more destructive and diverging forces on the other side, who are watching every converging move and how to destabilize that move. So that's why I said we should not think this will end in 1 year, because we as human beings have a tendency to get frustrated when we put a time limit to something and it doesn't happen within that time, and then we feel, oh, it's not happening. So mentally, it's not a battle which will end in 1 year. We may have new forms of demons coming in some other forms. And you see, it's a war of narrative, and the technology has even disrupted this monster and divided this monster into small, small monsters and planted them in our society without even crossing the border physically. That is becoming even more dangerous today. I'll tell you an example. I was with someone, he was telling me, it's very no in this forum, I don't mind admitting it. He said many of these people whom we are today referring, the most destructive forces I'm referring to, they have created certain groups within the society, WhatsApp groups, Facebook groups, and these groups are headed by someone, and all these heads are part of a larger group, where one incident goes, one direction comes, and it percolates to all group heads, they pass on to other group heads, and within seconds they create a fire in the society, and they lit the whole society, and that's how they destabilize. So it's a very different ball game. While we try to be a step ahead of them, the government and the security forces and the police and intelligence, they also have their own way of staying ahead of, because their intention is break India, their intention is destroy the civilization, their intention is complete bringing of Sharia to a nation like India, which is traditionally a Hindu nation. So there's a problem. Even the people, when you say word Hindu, they have a problem. Are bhai, Hindu is not a religion; it is a part of a huge civilization. So when when you have when you have educated people coming from the educational institutions belonging to the same belief system, saying and making statements where, where I say the left has completely destroyed the way education should have been in India than the way it is, you have an even bigger challenge. Though in last 7 8 years we have been able to make some progress, I think there is still a bigger progress that we have to make. We have to make sure, whether any religion, because this nation has never believed that one religion has only to move. This nation has been accommodative of every religion. That is why only country in the world, which is Bharat Varsha, where you had Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Islam, Zoroastrians, Jews, and every religion flourishing because of its culture, because of its civilization. But the same has become today one of the biggest risks to the nation, and that's where the nation will have to stay more alert. And we don't know how they are also going, because these are destructive forces around the world who are always looking at destabilizing India and destroying India. So that's why I said it may not be a 1 year battle. It may, because the way we see what's happening, how destruction is happening around the world, how we protect ourselves, even that is more important.
In fact, recently, Prime Minister Modi also, he made a statement. He said that these days we are not just fighting a traditional battle with weapons across the borders. The battle is exactly what you said, of thoughts which are coming via technology, and he said
See,
the
it's
same.
a war of narratives. And
Exactly.
today, technology is being used as one of the biggest instrument in creating a narrative. And that is something which is bothering India, because today in India you have a large section of people who are easy praise to these destructive forces, and that is the danger to the country.
No,
And Kashmir has,
just wanted
yeah.
to say what we keep hearing in the US now is democracy is in trouble. We should safeguard democracy. They started talking about that. Such things, if anyone stands up and talks, they'll be criticized here. You just like you mentioned, we cannot continue that kind of a discussion here. Next minute you'll be criticized. But you see, in the US they'll be mobilized. And then the talk is going to be more on democracy, and they will continue implement it. That aspect has to come here, and then people should start recognizing this. It was very fascinating. Yes, Rohini ji, you were saying something.
Yeah, I was just saying that, Kashmir has all Kashmiri Pandits have always been the victims of a narrative as much as that of the guns. Because, in early 90s, when we didn't have the private media, we didn't have the social media, people, even people in India, did not know what was happening in Kashmir. And so many years passed by, we lost so much time, almost maybe 15, 20 years. By then the world had changed, and this kind of a platform, where we can talk about it, and let the whole world know, this is really a privilege.
No, just wanted to say one more thing. You talked about the rituals, we, which is completely lost, and people have no idea what existed before. One of our early speakers, Brahmashri Sri Ramana Sharma, he talked about Vaidic traditions. And then he was telling not to use the word rituals. He said, use the word dharmic principles. I think that is very apt. What he said was, dharmic principles are all lost now. And if you look at, next movie that is going to be coming from the south called Ponniyin Selvan, that movie is about our ancient king, King Rajaraja Chola, belongs to ninth or 10th century. That is sort of fictional, but characters are all real. That movie is out anytime in September. You must watch that. If you look at one or two characters, they talk about Kashmir there. That means this higher seat of learning, somehow you've introduced that part in that well-researched book. The author Kalki traveled to Sri Lanka so many times, and then well-researched book. It's about 1200 pages, ran in local Tamil magazine for a number of years. Very popular, and the movie is out. They talk about Kashmir. So all those dharmic principles existed that time, which got lost. Like you mentioned, that peaceful coexistence, a forgotten word now. You mentioned peaceful coexistence up to 12th or 13th century, right? It's gone now. That's why nothing is happening. Is it is one of the reasons?
Sorry, can you repeat the last
No,
line?
you mentioned peaceful coexistence. I was just saying that is a forgotten word today now, right? Peaceful coexistence cannot happen again.
No, peaceful coexist. Let me give you an example. When I was in Kashmir, when I was, around 20 years of age in Kashmir, uh, I have had many Muslim friends, Sikhs, Buddhists, Christians who used to live around. We were a minority living in a majority area, but the way we would mingle with each other at that time, though there was a sense of discrimination that we would feel, but existence of the two communities uh, was not an idea that anyone could discard. And you will see there are many incidents where a Muslim coming and be participating in my what you call dharmic rituals or principles or my
Dharmic
festivals,
principles.
and I going and participating in their festivals, and this participation was always giving us a room to understand and accommodate certain things with each other. But today, if you look at not only Kashmir but many regions, what's happening, that there's a new narrative getting created, new belief system being penetrating in the larger section of the society, that this is kufr if you are going to someone's who is not the believer of uh, the one god that one believes in, and if you practice and participate in their functions, it is unreligious for, and you will be punished and penalized by the god. And you are doing something anti-religious if you are participating in other religions rituals or practices or festivals, even if you are wishing them. There are issues emerging that if you sing Vande Matram, if you sing Janagana Mana, if you see how minds are getting polluted. And when you say coexistence is based on certain accepted facts where I respect what you believe in and you respect in what I believe in. So coexistence requires that foundation of respect of each other's belief system. Otherwise, coexistence cannot happen. If the lotus plant says, I will not let the rose plant grow next to me, you cannot have the talk of coexistence going on around. You have to have both the plants growing side by side. So I'm saying both are good. I'm saying one religion is lotus, another religion is rose. They have to assimilate together. They have to respect what rose is meant for and what lotus is meant for. Both are meant for some different purposes, but both can coexist at one place. If that fundamental belief is missing, the coexistence is impossible. You can keep on talking about coexistence, but the other person will never let that happen. So coexistence requires both sides coming and finding a common ground, common sharing, common platform, where that is something which is getting damaged because of the global destructive forces who are creating a very different kind of a religious narrative and indoctrinating a different thought process where this is called anti-religious, and that is harming. In fact, many good friends of mine have said, boss, we agree with you, but I cannot openly say this because I will have a fatwa coming from somewhere else. So that is also a problem. So even a fearful person cannot be a party to a coexistence, because you can't rely on a person who says when he is with you, I am with you, but when it comes a larger milieu, he is silent. And this silence of these people has actually resulted into the destruction of thousands of Kashmiri Hindus in Kashmir, because many people say, we love you, but we couldn't save you. We can't speak, we can't come out. So your silence is then a part of the destruction process. So how can you on the one side be silent to the destruction that is happening, and on the other side you say we can have coexistence? Impossible. There are two opposite discussions happening.
Thank you, Rajji. Please come back and we will have another session on peaceful coexistence. We will have a session on this. That will be interesting. And thank you, Rohini ji. That was very interesting. You asked right questions for us to go through the book again, buy and read the book. The book is very interestingly written and very well organized with chapters. And I could also see I just glimpsed at them, and the page that appeared to me appeared from your book is about Kanchi Mutt performing um, Shankar Jayanti. and consecutively from 2010. It was very interesting, and I was really thrilled to see that page just appeared to me when I looked at it. And president of our Vadima Dharma Samajam is the one who is involved in that. Advocate
Thank you.
Balasubramaniam. He is very much involved. He is the one organizing that, and I will share this information with him. And very interesting session we had today, and look forward to seeing you again, Raj.
Thank you.
And you too, Rohini, for all book reviews, we want you to appear and start doing one every month. Thank you
Sure.
so much,
Thank you.
and
Thank you.
we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you, our viewers. Our session actually went beyond 1 hour, and it was very fascinating discussion. We hope to bring Vice Chancellor Raj Nehru ji again to continue that interesting topic we found today, peaceful coexistence. That seemed to be a very interesting topic by itself. We want to thank Kanji Mutt channels, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter for streaming this, and also Kamakodi.tv. Again, our India's leading daily newspaper, Dinamalar, which actually covered this today, and VDSP for streaming activity. My colleague is traveling, but still is attending to our streaming from Kakinada. So thank you all, and please stay tuned, and we'll meet again next Saturday, 7 p.m. Jai Jai Shankara, Hara Hara Shankara.